So, just really quickly then around accessing the Form F. So the Form F at the moment, what we've done is we've launched in England. We work across all 4 nations, as I've said, and we're in the process of launching in Northern Ireland. We're consulting with Northern Ireland key stakeholders at the moment. And then we'll be doing the same for, we've started work with Wales, who are doing a pilot, and we will be doing a pilot in Scotland as well. But for those people that are England license holders, your licensing officer, if you're part of an organisation rather than an independent social worker, your licensing officer should have received all of the information when we launched in middle of June. I'm trying to remember what date it was, or was it middle of May? I've lost the plot now on the date. But anyway, whenever we launched a number of weeks ago, your licensing officer in your organisation would have received that. If you've got any, if you're unsure about who might have received that information and whether it's not kind of reached all the right people, then check those emails on that slide there, licenses@coram.org.uk. I think that should say Coram BAF actually, licenses@coram.org.uk, where you can make sure you get that information. And if you've got any practice issues, again, that shouldn't say Form K, that should say Form F. I'm a bit worried now that this slide deck is, anyway, it's fine. If you just email advice@coram.org.uk, if you've got practice issues around Form F, it might be that you have practice issues around Form K as well, same advice email address, then please go ahead and do that. So just really quickly, what have we done in terms of revising Form F? So lots of you will be very familiar with it. And the last time that the Form F assessment was updated was in 2018. There were a few smaller revisions that took place in 2019, but the major work that happened was in 2018. So that was the last time it was updated. So we started this piece of work to revise where we are now. Almost 2.5 years ago. In fact, it is now 2.5 years ago. We set up a working group in Feb 2023. We had 17 members of that group, and it included care experienced adults, approved foster carers, local authority social workers, independent fostering agency social workers, and other key people across the sector. That group met many times. We looked at the existing, the previous Form F, to see what needed to be kind of updated and to see where the gaps were. And that group met over 9 times initially, and then a couple more times at the end of the after the pilot. We then started a pilot, and we asked our members to volunteer, and we ended up piloting with 12 agencies, 9 local authorities, and 3 IFAs. And we ran what we called surgery meetings during the pilot. So all of the organisations that were piloting the Form F came along to those monthly meetings, and they were able to share dilemmas, challenges, questions, good practice, reflections on what was working with the new form and what they needed to hear, what they needed some more support with. And essentially what we got from those pilot sessions was that we were able to make sure that the very final version that has been now published, which is the form and the guidance, that reflects everything that came out in the pilot. So I'll get on to some of those kind of things that we made sure we included as I go on. So we have found opportunity to get feedback from members and more broadly across the sector over the last 2.5 years. And we've done that in a number of ways. You can see here we've had, obviously, there's been as I've said, the working group, there's been the pilots. We have 2 advisory committees that are very specific around fostering in Coram BAF. One is entirely made up of foster carers, and one is our fostering advisory committee, which includes foster carers. We've consulted with them as we've gone along, and we've also worked with within our practice forum groups to get feedback from those groups. And then we've done all sorts of consultations and conversations with other key people in the sector, so including academics, including groups of independent social workers, and wherever we can, essentially, we've asked for feedback. We've also run a couple of surveys, one that was specifically for the pilot and one that was more broadly for members that were using Form F before we got started. So I just wanted to really quickly read a couple of quotes to you from people that were part of the working group. So it kind of gives you a bit of a sense of what this work has felt like and what it's been like. So the first one is from Stephen, who is a foster carer. And he said, the best people to know what it is like to be a foster carer are foster carers. Having the input of foster carers in the development of the new Form F template has meant a bigger focus on key areas within fostering, and more importantly, what children and young people want from their carers are now included within the form. And then Florence, who is an independent fostering agency, fostering management. She has expertise in fostering management for IFAs. She's also care experienced. She said, going through this process allowed me to remember why applicants want to care for children and to focus on what's important to know about the family in order to evidence that they can. To make a difference, we needed to immerse ourselves directly in the assessment process. So just a couple more quotes here, and then I'll move on to the next section. So this is Matt, who is a foster carer, adopter. He's also founder of Proud to Be Parents. If you don't know about Proud to Be Parents, I'd urge you to look them up. They're an organisation that support LGBT plus foster carers and adopters, based in Manchester, but they do work beyond Greater Manchester. So Matt said, it was a privilege to play a key role in this vital development in fostering practice, being part of a process that genuinely values lived experience and works to improve inclusivity across the sector. Felt both impactful and empowering. And then the last quote is from Kathleen, who is an independent social worker, a Form F assessor, and has had many years' experience of working in fostering. Kathleen said, I thoroughly enjoyed being part of the working group. It was an opportunity to reflect on and share good practice with colleagues in the field, playing a part in revising the Form F to assist practitioners in completing robust evidence-based assessments, where fostered children are central to assessment, discussion and reporting. I hope that as the new Form F is widely used, these development objectives will be achieved and recognised by practitioners, newly approved foster carers and fostering services and agencies. So there has been various organisations, various university teams, groups, individual researchers and so on that have looked into fostering broadly and looked into recruitment and retention and looked into what happens with how we get our foster carers and how we support them. But we particularly, as part of our thinking about what we needed to pay attention to, we looked at the research that was carried out by the Centre for Evidence and Implementation and supported by the Fostering Network. And this was recruitment and retention of foster carers in May 2023. So we looked at lots of research, but we wanted to pay attention to kind of recent, what felt like very current research. And some of the key messages from this particular piece of research, just you can see here, there was a real focus on needing to think about the motivations. So why people, what people's motivations are, and as part of that, exploring realistic expectations of the challenges and also the support available that will help agencies to recruit quality, motivated carers. Then another key point that another key message from their research was that they found that applicants were not being given sufficient information to support their decision early enough in the assessment and approval process. And then what that led to was individuals and services investing time and resources when fostering might not be the right fit. So we wanted to really think about that in terms of the assessment, that we weren't expending energy resources, which are obviously very limited, and that we wanted to make sure that we were trying to create the space for applicants to really do that thinking with their assessing social worker as early on in the process as possible, so that if now is not the right time, or they needed to take a pause, or if it's actually not going to be quite the right fit for their family, that kind of decision could be made earlier. And then the next point that that we pulled out particularly to share for this briefing session is, they've said, having stable, supportive social work staff who are skilled and experienced in all aspects of the fostering role could improve foster carers' experiences of the recruitment process and beyond. Feeling valued and respected and providing accurate information early are considered key in improving the recruitment and approval process. Now, those of you that are involved in assessing and supporting foster carers, none of this will be new news to you. You will be very, very aware of how important those initial relationships are to make individuals, to make applicants feel supported, if they feel understood and respected, and that they know that if they do have some areas where they might need some extra support or extra kind of whether it's training, whether it's shadowing, whatever that might look like, that if that's being provided by the service, then they kind of feel like they can lean into that and feel more honest about areas where they might feel that they've got less skill or they just need a bit more input. So what were the underpinning principles for us completing this piece of work? We wanted to, where possible, streamline and remove duplication from the assessment process. Now, by doing lots of feedback around the Form F, it's a long process, it's invasive, it's intrusive, it requires lots of sessions, lots of work. What we didn't set out to do was to kind of chop all of that and make it a very quick, swift process, because actually the reason that it's an invasive and intrusive and can feel quite onerous for the applicants is for good reason, because we're in the business of safeguarding, and what we absolutely need to do is it's essential that we make sure that the applicants that we're assessing are the right people and have the right skills and qualities and experience to offer fostering families, fostering households. So we haven't endeavored to kind of slash the process in that regard, but what we have endeavored to do is to pull out where there may be duplication, because we know that for some people, when we've heard back from panels, they've said to us that they read the same information over and over again. So we've obviously tried to make sure to remove that. The Form F was already strengths-based, but we've looked to enhance that. We wanted to make it more strengths-based and for it to really look at potential, to properly think about motivations, and also capacity to lean into, capacity to grow and learn and kind of develop skills. We wanted to add in a new section, which you will see shortly, which is what we've called, what does the child need? And so that's completely new. For those of you that have not seen the new Form F yet, this is new, and is this bit looks very different from the previous Form F because it's an entirely new section with a massive focus, a huge focus on what will every child need from a fostering family. Which is obviously quite a big ask, because each and every child is of course unique, but there are things that go across the board that each child will need. We wanted to make sure that trauma-informed practice was embedded throughout the assessment, and that particularly is apparent in the what does the child need section, but we had that in mind when we were looking at revising the form in its entirety. Our hope is that the assessment experience will be improved for applicants, and we did get some feedback, anecdotal, but we did get some feedback from the pilot from people who'd already been assessed with the previous Form F and then were assessed with the current Form F, and they said that they felt like it was more of an alongside process rather than done to. So that was definitely music to our ears, that it felt more of a more collaborative in an experience. And what we want to do with all of the work that we do when we are working across all of our core and BAF work streams, what we want to do is try and improve practice. Especially, practice can always be improved. There's always room for all of us to kind of make differences and improve where possible. And by doing what we're hoping for, some of that is around the consistency and also improving and expanding analysis skills. So we've done several developments of forms in the past 6 months. Our Form K, which replaced Form C, our kinship carers form, was published in February. We've also had our child permanence report, CPR, and other forms that we've published. And what we've looked to do with all of our form developments is to, within the guidance, to try and bring about the same messaging for practitioners. So for example, we've got a section around what makes good analysis, and you will see that same information is carried across the guidance for those different form developments. So we're hoping that, again, that kind of brings up the workforce, and that we're using the same language and the same advice and guidance, so that across the sector, those improvements hopefully will be felt more broadly rather than just thinking about fostering. I'm not going to read all of these out, but basically you've got the Form F, then you've got guidance notes and additional resources, which I'll come on to. And then there's a Form F example for foster carers. Now, this is just a blank template, okay? So this is a blank template. It just has an example watermark And this is for assessors to be able to share with applicants. Sometimes assessors share the whole form in advance, so they get to see what it's going to look like in its entirety, the blank template, I mean. Sometimes people share sections of it so that it doesn't feel kind of too overwhelming as a process, but that will be very much the kind of the unique decision around what the assessing social worker thinks the applicants need. And then there's a list of documents there. You can see those are all 2018, which are part of the package. If you've got a license with, you've got a Core and BAF license to use the forms, then you get those additional forms. Those forms and other forms for checks and references will be updated in due course, but at the moment it's to use those 2018 forms. Apart from what's called the fostering, it's not very snappy, but the fostering applicants weekly schedule. So this is essentially a very basic timetable, and I will get onto that in a minute, but or in a bit more detail. But it's a template that where the assessing social worker with the applicants can look at what an average week looks like, so that the fostering household to be, the applicants can put what they do on particular days and times of day, and each member of the household, so you get a bit of a sense of whether there's going to be room and space for them to foster a child, or whether this is an incredibly busy family and there's going to be kind of pinch points and areas that might feel a bit of a stretch, so that you can have those conversations quite early on with your applicants to see if this is going to be practical and doable. So I'm now going to show you the form and what it looks like. Now, these are, I'm really, really conscious that these are photographs of the form and the text is too small. It's too small for me to see unless I literally put my nose on my screen. So we're just showing you this so you get a bit of a sense of what the form actually looks like, rather than you being able to kind of scrutinize the detail. But we just wanted you to kind of see how it is. So section A, so there's the front sheet here and then section A. These look very similar to the previous Form F, because we've obviously needed to remain legally compliant with the fostering regs and the national minimum standards and the guidance, and kind of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So all of the way in which the information is captured in the previous Form F looks similar to the front page and section A as we go through now. So I'm just going to go through, and also just a kind of health warning that we've photographed pages from the form in the slides that follow, but it's not every single page of the form, because then we would be here for too long. But just for you to get a bit of a sense of what the flow of the form looks like. So this is obviously the front page and front sheet rather, and then section A, which is just information about the applicants, and starting off there at the bottom, the questions around identity. So gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, and ethnic heritage. And then the identity section carries on here onto the next page, where we've got, oh, I've got things written over the top now. I can't actually see it. I think that says linguistic heritage and languages, religion, disability or neurodiversity, and nationality, if that's required for immigration status. And then it just moves through all the sections that many of you will be very familiar with. So partnership relationship status, children under 18, other adults in the household, children under 18 living elsewhere, adult children living elsewhere, and then applications for that may have previously happened or have previously happened around applicants who might have applied to be a foster carer, kinship carer, an adopter, or childminder. So then it moves on to the checks. So we've got DBS, we've got health, we've got home local authority checks, we've got previous local authority checks for the past 10 years. And we've also got a note on there that if the applicants have parented or cared for children in any capacity, all of those local authorities need to be contacted and checks carried out, rather than just over the past 10 years, to make sure that we capture that we find out all information that relates to an applicant where they've been looking after a child. Then it goes on to references and verification of documents, and there's a section here around court proceedings, whether that's previous, current, or pending court proceedings. Then we've got employment and volunteering section. And then we've got previous employment or volunteering where the applicant has worked with children or vulnerable adults. We don't need to know every single last paper round and shop part-time job that people have done, but we do need to know anything that, of course, is relevant to the role of fostering. Then it moves on to the finance section, and then it moves on to the pets and animals. And then we go on to section B, which is where we start to do the kind of the real in-depth work with the applicants around what they're bringing, what they're bringing and what they have to offer in terms of being a foster carer. So I will read out these questions because there's 13 questions in this section. And you will see that what we've done is there are questions, and then they are grouped together in kind of 2s or 3s. I think some might be grouped in 4s, and then there is an analysis box afterwards. So they've been grouped kind of according to what made sense for the working group and for the pilots. And then there's an analysis section, and then there's a final analysis section for this bit at the end. But I'll just read out the questions, and we've written them. Tell us about. Now, that's not because the applicants fill in the form themselves. Absolutely not. We've been very explicit in the guidance that this is the assessing social worker is carrying out the assessment. They are doing all of the work. They're writing up their findings. It might be that they want to use some words that the applicants have shared verbatim, and they can make that very clear when they're writing up their report. They can say, you know, this is exactly in the words that the applicants said this, responded to this section or these questions or this discussion, if that feels powerful. And I know lots of assessing social workers like to do that. But this is not about handing over any part of the assessment to the applicants and saying, please fill this in and, you know, get it back to me. And that's not what this process is about. But we wanted to use the language tell us about, and the pilots fed back that this kind of landed well because it felt more conversational. It's that bit that I was talking about before where it feels more alongside and more collaborative. So tell us about your motivations and reasons for applying now. What do you imagine the impact of fostering would be on your family? If you're a parent, tell us about that. And then the next question, tell us about yourself in your own words. Describe your strengths, passions, likes, and hopes. Tell us about anything in life you find challenging, either now or in the past. Tell us about all elements of your own identity. And then it moves on to this analysis, and then we go on to 3. Tell us about your current relationship, or if not currently in a relationship, tell us about that. Then we've got tell us about how you live, what goes on in a typical week, working patterns, meals, routines, how you relax, busy times, quieter times. Tell us about everyone living in your home, including those who live there intermittently, e.g. at university or perhaps working away from home. Then we move on to family history and childhood. So describe your background, your current family relationships and dynamics. And this is where you would refer to the completed genogram that you would have carried out as an assessor. You'd have carried out the genogram before you got to this part of the assessment. And then we move to adult life experiences. So describe important events in your adult life, including significant changes and losses. Tell us about how these experiences have helped you manage stress and develop resilience. Tell us about your previous significant relationships is question 8. And then we move to 9, which is tell us about members of your family not living in your home, including children living elsewhere. Then we move on to education. Tell us about your experiences at school, college, university, vocational training. And then it's on to employment and your kind of current commitments. So regular commitments and employment history. Tell us about your paid and unpaid employment, volunteering and caring responsibilities, both current and previous. Expand on any roles relating to children and young people. And in this bit within the guidance, for example, the guidance, I will talk a bit more about the guidance in a minute, but within the guidance, we've explained here that for some people, they might do what could be defined as a caring type role for a neighbor, a friend, a family member, but they might not define it as that. They might not define it as caring. It might be something that they just do every week, once a day, more than once a day, but actually you need to kind of understand what that looks like for the individual and for the family. Because it may well impact on their availability to foster a child. So that's just one little example of kind of where we've added that information into the guidance to help assessors. Then the next one is around social health, which is a bit of a catch-all, where you're talking about social networks, neighbours, friends, community groups, extended family, faith-associated groups, interests, hobbies, and other connections. That is not an exhaustive list. Clearly, there are many, many things that create someone's social health, but that's kind of captured in that section. Then we've got tell us about the relevant training or fostering preparation activities you've completed. So that will be, lots of people will do the skills to foster training, preparatory training, which is the fostering networks training package, and has been updated and just launched. And we've done that to, we've managed to kind of align. So we've made sure that what we've done around Form F aligns with what the fostering network have done with their preparatory training, which is skills to foster. There are other types of preparatory training, like there are other assessments to assess foster carers, but those two particular practice tools have been done almost in conjunction. That was kind of planned, which we hope will be helpful. And then there's also in that section where you need to just make sure that you're flagging up areas of training or development that these applicants will need kind of going forward. So you make sure you put that in there. And then the last question here, number 14, is about finances. So this is tell us about how you organize your finances. And there's a real kind of emphasis around thinking about debt. We learned from the Leyland James Corkill tragic case where that child was murdered by one of their adopters, and in the review that looked into the kind of what happened there, what went wrong, one of the findings was that there was not enough information known about the debt that the family was experiencing and the kind of the pressures that created. And of course that there were many reasons. That's just one of the findings from that review. But in response to that, we've made sure that when we're looking at our form developments, our practice developments, that we've paid attention to making sure that those conversations that are difficult, many conversations that take place when you're assessing applicants are difficult, finance conversations being one of those that's really hard, but that we've made sure that we pay attention to that within the form, and we've explained it in the guidance. So I'm just looking at time. I probably need to speed up a bit. So we've now got section B part 2. This is the new section that will be unfamiliar to those of you that have not had sight of the form yet. And this is, what does the child need? Now, just in summary, this is 36 statements, and they're divided into identity and relationships, advocacy and empowerment, being part of a foster family, and strengthening and building resilience. Now, these 36 statements have been heavily informed by the work of Core and Voice. Core and Voice, many of you will know of Core and Voice. Core and Voice run the Bright Spot survey. They published their report called 10,000 Voices, which does what it says on the tin. It was 10,000 voices of children in care and care leavers who basically completed a survey where they were asked about what they needed from their foster carers. They were asked other things as well, but they were asked about what they needed from their foster carers. So these statements, like I've said, are really very heavily influenced, informed by our working group, by our pilots, and by that research, that big body of evidence of listening to children and young people telling us what they need. So I'm not going to read all of the 36 statements out. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, do you actually have to go through all 36 statements with your applicants? Short answer, yes. Longer answer is, when you're having a discussion with applicants, they will give you examples, and they will be able to kind of talk to you about particular areas that you're discussing, and you're likely to cover several of these 36 statements within kind of one discussion. So it's not about repetition. If you've covered something that you've talked about under identity and relationships, and it carries over to some of the statements in thinking about resilience, that's fine. Don't write it again, don't repeat it, just cross-reference that it's covered in the discussion and you've captured that in your report previously. But yes, the short answer, like I've said, is we do want you to go through each of these statements, because we know that the ask that we have of our foster carers is huge. So when we're working with our applicants, we've got to be fair. We have to kind of respect the role that they're going to be fulfilling if they're approved, and we need to let them know that the kind of the extent to which they're going to need to be able to fulfill all of these requirements that each child will need. So I'm going to pick out a few from each section and then move us on. So within identity and relationships, the first one, I need all aspects of my identity to be understood, respected, and celebrated so that I can feel proud of who I am. And I'll choose another one here. I need you to accept my family. They are part of my identity. So if you can, I need you to build positive relationships with them. And in the guidance, which I'll show you very briefly in a minute, we give information, we give further information and supplementary questions so that assessing social workers can feel equipped and that they've got the tools that they need to have these conversations. Then the next section is advocacy and empowerment. And I'll just read out a couple of these so that you get a flavour of what these statements are like in this section. I need you to challenge discrimination and prejudice in any circumstances and to promote equality, diversity, and inclusion. And then another one, I need you to work as part of a team to ensure my needs are met. We know that it can be very challenging for foster carers and any people working as part of a team, because there are always different views and different ways of approaching things. So we want applicants to kind of have an awareness of that, you know, that is going to be part of their role, and how do they think they're going to manage that? What will they need to support them if there's difference of opinions, or do they feel very equipped because of their previous jobs or their previous roles where they've just had to kind of build up some skills around managing difference of opinion, for example. Being part of a foster family. I'll read the top two here because the working group spent many hours on each of these statements thinking about the wording. But on this one, we concentrated. It says, I need to feel safe in your home. And then the next statement is, I need to be kept safe when you are caring for me, wherever we are. So this is, we wondered about combining those two statements, and actually it felt really important that how a child feels safe within a home is different to how they can be held in mind and kept safe when they're not in the foster carer's home, and what that looks like, and kind of exploring that with applicants about how they might be able to make sure that a child they're caring for who's not physically in their home still feels held in mind, thought about, considered, and cared for. So that's two examples there. And then strengthening and building resilience. I need support in all areas of my well-being. And then another one is, I need you to notice and understand my strengths as well as my needs. So that kind of balance. So rather than always being focused on kind of deficits, which we do not want for our children in care, it's about looking at where their strengths are, where their uniqueness is, and making sure that all of that is bigged up and praised and celebrated proportionately and appropriately, and you know, with the right kind of time and response, but also thinking about where the needs are and how they balance against the strengths. So you'll see that in this section we've said I need. So we've written it as it's written in the first person of the child. Now obviously a child is not going to use a lot of this language, because a lot of this language is very social work language. But what we wanted to do was to really help the applicants to start to imagine what it's like being a child in their family, in their home, entering their house as someone who's never been inside this family home, this environment. We wanted to really help applicants start to understand what that feels like. And the feedback we've had from the pilots, the assessing social workers, from carers that were assessed and then approved, from managers, from panels, is that this bit really brings to life as much as it is possible, right? It's impossible to do it entirely, but as much as is possible, bring to life what it's going to be like as a child living with this family or living with this individual if it's a sole carer. So that's what the kind of the aim of this section is, and we hope that, you know, once this is embedded in practice, new developments we know takes time, so we're very aware of that, but we hope that that's kind of the experience that will be felt across those people who are being both assessed and the assessors. And that's just the last couple of statements on that section around resilience. And then we move on to section C. This will look almost identical to those of you that are very familiar with the previous Form F around supporting information. This is just you're making sure that you've got all the information and you can sign it off, tick it off. So this is your checks. This is references, and then summary and recommendation at the end. And essentially, this is where the applicant or applicants have to have read the report before it goes to panel. We still hear, sadly, of applicants who say that they don't get to read their report before they go to panel. They don't get to see what's been written about them. They don't get opportunity to share their comments and observations and feedback, which of course is poor practice. So this bit is really, really essential to kind of make sure that this is happening for all applicants, that they get a chance to read and see what's been written about them. So We've updated our guidance. When we have a form, we have guidance that goes alongside it. We would basically, our message would be, if you don't have the guidance, you can't really complete the form. You have to have access to the guidance. So if any of you are in a situation where you've been given the updated form but you haven't got the guidance, the clear message we're giving is you've got to go back to your people who give you the form and say, I need the guidance. I have to have the guidance. The guidance, a lot of work has gone into the guidance. It's 45 pages, I think, in total. I'm not showing you all 45 now, just a few pages, just so you get a feel of it and a sense of it. But it tells you how to complete each and every section. So it's essential reading for anyone that's assessing or QAing or managing, supervising, assessing social workers, and is also an interesting, helpful read for other people working in fostering, including panel members and so on. Panel advisors especially so. So what have we got in here? Like I've said, we've got some things now that we have added in across lots of our guidance. So we have this anti-racist and anti-discriminatory practice statement that we've added in, and like I've said, that carries across, so you can see there what our messaging is around needing to be proactively anti-racist, not just saying, yeah, I'm not racist. You've got to be very proactive in that space. And that's all part of assessing, obviously. We've got also a new section which talks a bit more about what makes good analysis. So we've got some definitions in there, and also some examples of kind of, not example questions that you, statements that you can literally cut and paste and lift into your report, because that's not what we want to do, but some ideas around what analysis actually looks like. And then we've got sections in here around identity, yes, we've got information around identity because we're really aware that as social workers, we can talk about our own identity quite readily, often with confidence and curiosity. If not confidence, it shouldn't always be confidence, but I mean, talking about our own, we can be fairly confident. When we're talking about others' identity, it does need to be with curiosity and respect. And so we've added in information here around how to have those conversations with applicants. Some applicants will feel very comfortable talking about elements of their identity and thinking about identity that might be different for a child they're caring for, whereas other applicants, that will feel less familiar to them and they will need some support in that. So we've given some advice and guide in the guidance. So for example, we've said a great starting point is for the assessor to talk about their own identity, bits that they feel comfortable to share. So they can bring to life, rather than having these kind of slightly generic, bland conversations, actually bring to life. My identity includes this and this and this. This element is important to me because this part of my heritage, my faith, my race, my culture, languages spoken, all of those, my sexual orientation, all of those bits that make up identity, and for the assessor to share the bits they feel happy with, to bring that to life for the applicants to be able to start to do the same thing. So then we've got within each of the 4 sections on the what does the child need, so the identity and relationships, the advocacy and empowerment, being part of a foster family, and the resilience section, we've added in a case study. The pilot said to us, please give us case studies. This will really help us, especially for applicants that maybe have less experience with parenting or caring or looking after children, or just generally. Pilot said that the pilot members of the pilot said this will be useful. So we've got 4 case studies. These are optional, right? They are literally, they're part of the guidance. As an assessing social worker, you can choose to use them or not. You can use 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. It's entirely up to you, but we wanted to offer this as part of the kind of package of support to help have these conversations in the what does the child need section. And then we've also got, like I said, under each, so this one here as an example, I need you to help me learn about my life story. So we've added in a bit more about what does that actually mean. We've added in paragraph statements, sometimes supplementary questions, bullet points, pointers, so that you can kind of dig into that with the applicants, and hopefully use this as much as you need to. For some assessing social workers, the what does the child need statements will feel familiar because you'll be using this already in your practice. But for others, there was definitely feedback that they wanted some extra input. And there you can see that the next 2 case studies there that we've got within the guidance. So the other bit that we've added to the guidance, which is new, is we've added this tools and resources section. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, and I imagine this list will grow significantly at the point we revise Form F again, which I hope is not going to be too soon because it's quite a big piece of work. But you can see here what we wanted to do was we wanted assessors to have places they could start to signpost applicants around areas that they need to discuss that the applicants might not feel they've got kind of up-to-date, current, or any knowledge in potentially. So what makes life good for children in care? That's that 10,000 voices report from Cora Voice, which informed those what does the child need statements. And then we've got some other sections here. Understanding the emotional impact of abuse, neglect and trauma. There's a couple of places to signpost to, digital safety, and then thinking about protective characteristics. So understanding discrimination, anti-racist practice, LGBTQ+, and neurodiversity and disability. So those are just a few examples, and that's not for assessors to go, right, I'm just going to look at that list and send all of those out. It's kind of a bit of a starting point for assessors and applicants, where you can then kind of find other resources. Fostering services and agencies will have many of their own places to signpost. I know lots of fostering agencies buy various books, always signpost to particular TED Talks or articles or video clips. So that all of that kind of body, if you like, of information and resource exists in fostering agencies already. So this is just to kind of add on to that resource library, if you like, so that there are places to signpost to. So key points, I think we've covered this. It's been piloted. It's been a huge piece of work. We've had masses of input from masses of people over the past 2.5 years, so that it's really felt like a very kind of collective effort. And we've listened carefully to feedback. We are aware, like I've said, that it's going to take time to embed in practice and for confidence to increase in using a new form, like with any new tool that we have to use in work. Because we're really acutely aware of that, we are urging you, suggesting, perhaps somewhere in between urging and suggesting, we would invite you to attend our practice forums. We have fostering practice forums where we will be talking about the Form F and how to use it and any challenges or dilemmas. We are looking into setting up what I think we'll call a community of practice, which will probably run for a year or so, where we will invite those people that are actually carrying out assessments and managers to come along and share what's working well and share good practice and any challenges. We offer training as part of Core and BAF. We offer training at the moment. We have a 2-day training course for which is about how to assess applicants, and we're looking to developing a 1-day course, which will be probably really helpful for those of you that know how to assess applicants but want to get up to speed, to increase your kind of knowledge and skills around the revised Form F. If you've got specific inquiries around specific questions, then do what you ordinarily do, which is contact our advice line, and we are open to feedback. We won't be revising the Form F immediately unless there's some significant legislative change from the DFE, which we're not aware of. But we are, of course, we want to hear feedback. We want to know what's working well, and we definitely want to know what we can do to help support. So I think now, James, we've got a few minutes for questions, if that's okay.
Yeah. So if people want to put some questions in the chat, we've got quite a lot of people in the room. So we've got 120. So people, the chat is now open. I'll be sort of collating them, and if there's sort of general themes, I can sort of bring them back. But if you want to put any questions in the chat, that would be great.
Sorry, I should have announced that earlier, shouldn't I? So people had time to pop the questions in the chat. My bad. We've got, yeah, while people are writing questions, just to let you know, I've talked about the training. I'll just show the next slide. And so email our training team if you want to find out about training, as well as our open course training. Organizations can commission training from us. So they can commission, an organization can commission training that we run for the open course, but you can kind of say, I want this training and I want to fill it up with all, members of my team, my fostering service. But also we do bespoke training. So if you've got a particular request of something training wise that you're really interested in, us running for you, then get in touch and we can see if that is feasible. The new undertaking guide, I'm sure that's going to be one of the questions. The book that people call the Blue Book, the Roger Chapman undertaking, Roger Chapman wrote the previous one, Undertaking a Fostering Assessment, is going to be published later this year. We are in the process of updating that. So lots of you will have the form, the guidance, and you will use that Blue Book. You will get an updated version, or there will be one available to buy, I should say, towards the end of this year. And I think I've talked about the Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland.